Right. Hi, I'm Tamara Leigh, the editor of Blackout Magazine, and we are sitting down to do a little 1-2 with Hope Giselle, advocate, activist. There's a lot of things going on, so we just want to say
Right.
thank you for taking a minute to sit down to talk to us about it.
Absolutely. Thank y'all for having me.
Of course. How you feeling, first of all? It's a lot going
I'm
on.
I'm tired.
I bet.
Look, I'm tired, but I think that I feel really fulfilled right now, especially after having such a great activation. It feels really good to one, have that work be seen by people who were on the opposition and kind of sort of realize how silly and ridiculous some of this stuff is as compared to the real issues.
Yeah, say that. All right, so obviously all eyes have been on Washington for the week because there
Yeah.
is a huge landmark case going on about trans rights and gender affirming care and all of the things. And so during that time where, we and they have been converging on the Capitol, um, you and crew um, did a demonstration of sorts, a protest of sorts, that was maybe less than typical what people are used to seeing in terms of making a statement and creating
Yeah.
a movement. And so, first of all, before we get into the whys and the whats, can you just talk to us about exactly what happened? For people who haven't seen the video, who I don't know how, because it is going wild on social media at this point, but for those who haven't seen the video, can you just tell us what the thing was?
So we wanted to have an act of civil disobedience that ensured that everybody that came with us to be a part of this activation, this protest, this civil disobedience was also able to go home that day without wondering whether or not we were going to end up jailed or have to pay fines or any of those things. And while we were prepared for the worst to happen, we went in with the preparation that we wanted to avoid all of that. And so our goal was to go into the same restrooms that we were told that our community would not be welcomed into, and simply create a space where people understood and recognized and realized that it ain't that serious, right? Trans folks are not in the restroom to harm people. If anything, we're in there to have a dance party, right? That is the most outrageous things that a trans person is likely going to be doing in the restroom is just enjoying ourselves. And so we created a space of love and peace and community in a bathroom where oftentimes people want to paint this picture that we're going to be monsters um and honestly that we're going to be, I think, less than savory individuals, which is simply just not true.
Fair, fair. All right. So obviously, you're going super viral. There's organizations sharing it, there's politicians sharing it. It's making its rounds on TikTok and all the things. I heard that the host of The View shared it last night, which is crazy. So
Um,
with anything that gets attention, there's going to be people that are praising it and there's going to be people that are criticizing it.
Absolutely.
You are not new to this, so you know how that goes.
Look,
Um, so what has that looked like for you? Like, what does the praise part of it look like for you, and what has the critique about it look like for you?
I mean, the praise is something that feels different for me. Oftentimes, I'm used to being the person that has to say and do the things that other people don't want to do.
Yeah,
And so it's easy to become the person that is seen as the bully or the person that wants to be, divisive. And so this time, it just feels really good to see that people understand what the motive behind the action was. And that felt really amazing. What's really interesting to me is that a lot of the backlash is coming from the fact that we had people who folks perceive to be cisgender men in the restroom. And there was only, one person that, I think really gets under people's skin, but that person is even a non-binary person.
right.
And everyone else is a TGNC person. And what was interesting about that is that the whole point of that video was to show folks that this is what the bill will do, right?
Right.
This is exactly the folks that are going to be in the restroom with your children, with your little girls, in the event that these bills get passed. Trans men that look like the men that you were all upset about in this video are going to legally have to use that restroom. And so, are you really about the safety of your children, the safety of your wives and mothers and aunts? Or are you really just on this bigotry train because it's easier to be an asshole or a jerk than it is to just say, actually, everybody has to use the bathroom. Everybody has the capacity to be horrible while using the bathroom. We're just going to trust that people won't and move on with our lives.
Right. Right. Yeah, the ramifications are wide in ways that I don't think people even conceptualize. Like what
Mm.
what happens here. A lot of it is just words, and then people aren't looking at what actually comes out of it. So for me, that would be the why.
Absolutely.
You got into your why. You did. You got into your why, but like why you, why this? Why was this the thing that you felt drawn, called to do?
Because it starts with the bathrooms at the Capitol and federal buildings. Then it moves into everyone's workplace. Then it moves into everybody's Walmart, local coffee shop, mom and pop barbecue spot. Like it moves in all of these different ways that then helps to eradicate trans people from public existence. When you can't use the restroom anywhere in public, what ends up happening is that you stop wanting to go out in public. Because if I cannot relieve myself when I go to Disneyland, if I can't relieve myself when I go to a comedy show, if I can't relieve myself when I go to Whole Foods, I no longer want to do those things. And what's interesting is that we live in a society where honestly, you don't have to go shopping for your own groceries. You don't necessarily have to go and do some of the daily functions because there are all types of apps and people and groups that you can hire to do those things for you. But if you lack the access to do that, then you're forced to go into public and be ridiculed. And before we get to that point, I wanted to put a stop and let them know now that we're not going to be painted out as monsters. And I think that it's important that we do that before things get out of hand. It's one thing to be reactionary and respond to the thing that has happened. It's another thing to get in front of it so that people make sure and ensure that it doesn't happen.
Is there a piece of it that's also about showing joy, not just showing persecution? Like, did that factor in for you? Like, to the people that might be critical and say, well, this is a serious issue and, people are being hurt. And how do you respond to that, to those people that don't understand the wrapping joy into that moment of protest?
So people are used to us yelling and screaming and, getting arrested and being pepper sprayed. And they're used to seeing the parts of our activations that come with the trauma. They are not used to seeing us activate in ways that also center our joy and center our humanity. Trans people are not workhorses. We're not just the trauma that comes with being trans. And we're not just like the bullshit that comes with the ideation of people trying to make us seem like we are these scary things and menaces to society. And so I think that the goal was to not only say that we are here and we're going to use the restrooms and that we've been using the restrooms, but that we are going to center joy in this moment. We're not going to sit on the floor and cry and whine and bitch. We are going to come into these restrooms and bring joy and light the same way that we do in most of the spaces. There are very few people that actually run across or interact with people of trans experience that don't have a good thing or a joyful moment or get a piece of advice that they wouldn't have gotten otherwise at any point. And so I think that what I wanted to do was just recenter that. We can have a protest that says, don't fuck with us. And also one that says we are human beings that are capable of love, joy, happiness. And that's what we are choosing to stand in this moment, while we're also being defiant and disobedient to bills and plans and laws that seek to eradicate us.
Absolutely. Okay, so I saw your video last night on Instagram. A whole lot of people saw your video last night on Instagram. So obviously there is inter in community stuff that's actually also at play here. I mean, you don't necessarily have to be in the know or in the circle to understand that within any movement, there is, I think, every civil disobedience movement in the history of time, there have been different ways that people approach leadership, ways that people approach resistance. And so things happen. So,
Right.
is there anything that you would like to say to just set the record straight about that inner community stuff?
I think that our goal as a whole is liberation for all TGNC folks. And if you're like me, that goal is expansive. So it's not just TGNC folks, it's folks that are a part of all of my intersections. I want women, I want Black women, I want all of the folks to be in spaces where we are being respected, we're being heard, and our issues are being prioritized and platformed in a way that they usually aren't. And oftentimes within the infighting that happens in community, a lot of us have personal beef. We have personal issues. We have personal conversations. There is, backdoor kitchen table stuff that's happening that folks are not aware of because they shouldn't be. They don't have to be.
Right.
But those things then fall into the work. I am never going to gatekeep what a person can do to the movement for the sake of my own ego because I don't like the way that this person shows up or because this person said something to my friend 3 years ago and now I have a vendetta for them. I think that if we're going to survive these next 4 years, we have to do so as a marginalized group together, regardless of your personal beef. It's okay that you don't like the fact that this person is giving Malcolm X and you're giving Martin Luther King. But
Right.
at the end of the day, if we work together, there's a place for both of those messages. And I think that oftentimes when people are being asked how to galvanize, who to call, who to put things, in front of, and how do we get laser focused into these movements, people are like, well, I don't want to do that with her because she does things like this, or I don't want to do that with her because then she'll get the spotlight, or I don't want to work with him because he's more passable than I am. And so I usually am going to get dead named or misgendered if I'm standing next to this person. And oftentimes we let petty beef and we let petty issues separate us even further. And that cannot be what we do. You don't have to like everybody that is in the movement work. You don't have to agree with the way that they do their work, but we do have to understand that everybody wants to hear and see and move and motivate differently. And sometimes those things are going to go against the way that you do them, but that person's work and that person's voice and that person's organizations and groups are just as important as yours are. And everybody needs to work together to ensure that we get the most amount of people to hear all of those messages as we can. Gatekeeping advocacy is not going to save us. Gatekeeping advocacy does not do anything except continue to make sure that Republicans and people on the right know exactly where to hit us so that they can put a chink in our armor, so that they can crack our glass and ultimately leave us in a space where we are infighting with each other instead of outfighting towards them and the bills and the laws that they are trying to pass against us. So I think first and foremost, what we need to do as a community is be able to put things to the side in the name of the work. And two, we have to get over our egos for the sake of being able to say that we were the one that got the headline. We were the person that did the thing. There are so many articles out about the bathroom video, and my name is not attached to any of them, even though I am the organizer. I'm not going into people's comments saying, oh my God, like, don't forget to tag me because I organized this. I'm just happy that people are seeing that. It's not about the fame. And if that's why you're doing it for the photo op and for the fame and for the cute strategic pictures, you're not doing it right. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to work with you. It simply means that I understand that our agendas are different, but our goal is the same.
Oh, yes, that was a soundbite. I love that. That was amazing. For anyone who still doesn't get it, for people who are outside of the fray, they don't think they know a trans person, they
Yeah.
have never encountered someone from our community, they don't understand that queer rights and trans rights are human rights, like they just don't get it. A message to them about this conversation about bathrooms. What do you want them to hear?
As it pertains to bathrooms, what I need folks to understand is that the people that are pointing the fingers at trans folks are the people that have been not only accused the most, but have committed the most crimes in those same bathrooms. Rich, white, wealthy, heterosexual, cisgender men have caused more harm in bathrooms, both male and female, than any trans person has ever been able to do, been accused of, or has actually done. And we are allowing these people to continue to scapegoat every marginalized community. And I'm not just talking about trans folks. I'm not just talking about queer people. I'm talking about we've allowed rich, white, heterosexual, cisgender men to marginalize everybody except themselves. And it's really interesting that every single time that the thing starts to heat up for them, they point the finger somewhere else and distract us. We have to stop allowing people to distract us from the people that are the real the real boogie monsters and the real people that we need to watch out for putting their fingers under our stalls and looking over and taking pictures because these people don't need wigs and dresses. If they want to enter the women's restroom and sneakily do something to you, they will, and they have. This is not something that I am assuming. These are things that have been proclaimed. There are very few articles of real trans people going into the restroom and harassing cisgender women. However, there are umpteen million articles about rich white heterosexual men going into bathrooms. There's umpteen articles about men, period, who are cisgender and not dressed up, not pretending to be trans, not pretending to be a woman, not even feminine, going into restrooms and harming people. So this ideation and this notion that they're trying to get you to believe is because they want to deflect from the idea that they are the true predators and they are getting over on you by making it easy because we are a marginalized group that is easy to hate. Stop allowing them to use your hate to further their movement, considering that all of us have a common enemy in them.
Okay, so I know that while you were there, you also made a stop in Nancy Mace's office.
Yes.
And so whether you were heard or whether you weren't heard in that moment, if you had a message, like this will be our parting message, if you have a message for Nancy Mace in this moment, in this piece of history, who ironically, her original views and her original stance on queerness and transness was very, very different.
Completely
So,
different.
so if you had a message to her right now, not in front of the cameras so that she doesn't have to do the thing and wear the mask, if you had a message to her right now, what would it be?
To be perfectly honest, I think that my first initial thought would be that this tranny can't stand you, bitch. That would be my initial message. But I think that if I had to have a conversation with her where it was cameras off and we were just two women speaking to each other, I would ask her how she would feel if she was put out of a space and forced to go into a space that was dangerous for her. As a person who is a survivor of rape, both of us are survivors of rape and sexual assault. If you were forced to go into a space where that was undoubtedly a possibility for you, how would you feel? If you were forced to go into a space where there is more than likely on a daily basis going to be trauma caused against you, your body, whether that be physical, whether that be verbal, whether that be mental, how would you feel? Before we are trannies in the bathroom, we are human beings. And if you can't see the humanity in a person, you don't deserve to be a congresswoman. And there's something to be said about the idea of people who came into that seat by using love and peace and the upward motion and mobility of the community to hold that space, who is now trying to do the exact same thing that the people that she claims that she was against when she got it are doing to us. Don't be a hypocrite, because we can see through that and we can smell it. And when you finally wake up and smell the coffee, you better hope that the breakfast is still on the table, because we remember all of these things. And we are not going to let you forget your bad behavior when you realize that the same group of people that you are advocating for also want you out of their spaces.
That is powerful. All right. So again, thank you for sitting down with us. I know there's a lot going on in the world and in your world. So thank you for taking a moment to just talk to us. Give us a little insight on the background of this movement that you're creating. How can people support you? How can they follow you? How can they support you? How can they add to your mission? How can they add to the mission? Let us know what we can do.
Absolutely. So folks can follow me at Hope Giselle. And also I have a nonprofit called Allow Me. It is at the Allow Me movement on Instagram. And this was our first major movement. And it's thanks to community members. Community members helped to raise money for a potential bail fund that turned into funds that we used to get people back home who ended up staying and wanted to just be a part of the support. And what I realized is that it does take a village. You can have the biggest platform in the world. You can have the most eloquent way to deliver messaging. But if you don't have community and the support of people backing you, you get nowhere. And so if people can truly support not only the work that I'm doing, but the work of the people that I am backing, Gender Liberation Movement is started and co-founded by Raquel Willis, who did a movement the next day at the Capitol where they did get arrested. And while that wasn't my silo, it is still it's still an important part of the thing that is happening to help make sure that these bills and these bans and all of these laws are potentially stopped. And so I think that the work of Raquel needs to to be centered. The work of the Transgender Law Center and Mariah Moore needs to be centered. The work of a SNAPCO in Atlanta needs to be centered. The work of the Lavender Rights Project needs to be centered. There are so many folks that are a part of this movement that are doing the work that I think need to be centered and need to be centered at this time. And even if we don't always agree, I think that the biggest way to support us is to pick your poison and do it well. Just do it well.